All right, everyone, welcome to day 4 of the Bringing the Farm to School workshop. So just as we open up for today, I wanted to hand it over to you all and get a sense of just how you're feeling on this day. This is the last day of our workshop. We've inundated you with a lot of information, so we would just love to hear from you. How are you processing it? What kind of questions do you might have? What's exciting you? So let's take a moment to just share any of your thoughts, reflections, questions that you may have. Go ahead and utilize the chat or come off mute and share. Let's see, looking forward to breakout time and talking how to make this happen in Hampshire utilizing the marketing toolkit. Great. And I think you get a point for that. Any other reflections, thoughts, questions at this point?
Hey, good morning, Tomas. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about was there was I can't remember the guy's name, but a speaker from Texas that was I think on the second day,
Mhm.
and he was talking about coordinating with retail operations like supermarkets, and it's something that I've never really thought about, but in some of our subgroups and back to that 99-cent broccoli I was talking to you all about, if there's a way that we could, if they're already bringing a truck down and we can kind of, and there's Hannafords all over the place, maybe there's a way to kind of tag onto them and utilize some of that procurement opportunity. But that's just one kind of concept that I've never thought about that I learned from this.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And certainly, if you have any other questions about those processes, Robert's full of those answers. So we can certainly at the end share everyone's, all the speakers and presenters' contact information so you all can do all the follow-up you need to. All right. Any others? All right, great. So today is going to be all about bringing together all the pieces we've been talking about over the last 3 days. We're going to start with our virtual site visit to learn more from a producer about their farm to school sales. And then after that, we're going to dig into the planning and outreach tools. Of course, you'll have plenty of time to meet with your breakout groups to really talk about planning, outreach, and of course, mulling over some of the components of the trainer action plan. So on that note, I'm going to pass it to Mike Lewis to get us started. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Tomas. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike, and I am a sustainable agriculture specialist. I work out of the NCAT Northeast office. It's great to be with you all today. I'm glad you've hung it out, toughed it out, and that you're here with us today. So as one of the things that we want to talk about as part of designing a peer-led and experiential training, we do recommend that the trainers include at least one panel or facilitated group discussion featuring local farmers and school market representatives during each local producer training that you would host. What these discussions do is actually create a critical opportunity for incorporating the local context that you've been hearing a lot about over the previous sessions in the week. Also helping to answer specific marketing questions that could arise, and almost as importantly, addressing common misconceptions about selling to schools. These panels can function as networking opportunities between and amongst producers and school buyers. We also do encourage you as trainers to customize the panel for your producer network. Today, we're going to be hearing from a food hub and a producer. In a lot of states, a food hub or a third-party aggregator may not be relevant. So keep in mind that panel composition can change and depends on the locale and what producers specifically need to hear for information. For more guidance on how to plan a panel at your local producer training, you can find that on page 111 in the Facilitator guide. Today's panel is more targeted at highlighting areas relevant for trainers to consider as you are planning your local producer training. And what you'll see is first, we'll have a facilitated dialogue with our panelists, and then we'll have an opportunity for open question and answers at the end. If you have any burning questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box so that we can incorporate those into this panel later on. And actually with that, I'm gonna hand it off to my associate, Chris Lent from the Northeast Office at NCAT to introduce our panelists today.
Thank you, Mike. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, because I was having a little trouble with audio, but thank you, Mike. I'm Chris Lent. I'm an agricultural specialist with NCAT, for those who haven't met me yet. And I had the pleasure of asking our two guests to join us here today. So I'd like to introduce them to you now. Joe Sikowski operates Joe Sikowski Farm and Lakeside Organics of Hadley, Massachusetts. And the farm was originally founded by Joe's grandfather, and they grew tobacco and potatoes and cucumbers and crops like that. Now Joe focuses on organic and conventional fruits and vegetables. And on the marketing side, they're servicing schools and universities and other farms and grocers as well. So welcome to Joe, and thank you for being here. And our other guest today is Alex McCullough. Alex is co-director of Food Connects, which is a Brattleboro, Vermont-based food hub that runs a pretty robust farm-to-school program. Alex has been involved in agriculture in many different facets for many years, from production to research to international agricultural development, and now local food distribution. Most recently, he managed production of specialty crops at Harlow Farm in Westminster, Vermont, where he also led commercial kitchen value-added production and coordinated the winter CSA there as well. So thank you, Alex, for joining us, and thank you, Joe, for joining us. And with that, I will throw things back over to Mike and back to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Chris. So we're gonna move into introductions. It looks like Alex, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you still hear me? All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. And I guess I should start by saying that our situation here at Food Connects is maybe a little complicated, so bear with me. But I am co-director of the Food Hub at Food Connects. Food Connects is a nonprofit. We're based in Brattleboro, Vermont. We serve primarily southeastern Vermont, our little corner of the state, but given our location at this juncture of 3 states, Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, our reach in many different ways goes across all these borders. So when I say that I'm co-director of the Food Hub is one of our 2 primary programs at Food Connects, and the other program is our Farm to School program. So we distinguish those 2 within the context of our organization by defining one as primarily educational, and that's the Farm to School program, and the other as kind of a venture, an entrepreneurial venture that works hand in hand with the Farm to School program. So Food Connects was founded in 13, and our mission officially is to deliver local food as well as wraparound educational services aimed at transforming the food system. And in that mission, we try to capture the relationship between these two key pieces of our organization. The Farm to School program, I'll start there. It's the Farm to School program itself is not my program, but I've been working with them and alongside them for about 6 years now, going on 6 years, in the capacity of directing our food distribution through the Food Hub. Our Farm to School program primarily serves schools within Windham County, so it's the southwestern or southeastern county of Vermont. And that includes about 30 to 35 schools in any given month that are officially member schools of Food Connects. So on a sliding scale, depending on what kind of services they are contracting for and their ability to pay, those schools register with Food Connects through a contribution. And in response to that contribution, Food Connects then offers essentially coaching services for whatever farm to school activities those schools are hoping to accomplish, whether that has to do with food sourcing in the cafeteria, or has to do with school gardens, or has to do with facilitating curriculum development within classrooms, or just generally starting from from square one and trying to define what farm to school actually means for that school. Our farm to school coaches also find themselves every year having to or being asked to come in and help to facilitate transitions between food service management companies, or transitions from a food service management company run food program to an independently run food program, and helping to flesh out, define, and envision what that transition means for the school's relationship to fresh and local foods. On the Food Hub side of things, our Food Hub program, we consider it a wholesale distribution food hub. So the word food hub, or the term food hub, is defined in many different ways, is used in many different ways. But for us, we deliver local and regional foods to wholesale accounts around our area. Like I said, in the 3 states around us. We've been operating in one form or another since 2009, so going on 12 years. And we started in 2009 with a Subaru, delivering apples from 10 miles up the road to schools and hospitals 10 miles down the road, and making that connection that really wasn't able to be made before, which is kind of astonishing to think about these days. But back then, that sourcing connection just did not exist. And since then, we've grown to, this year we're projecting we're going to be doing close to $2 million in sales. We are working with dozens of schools and institutions across the area. We run our own trucks. We have a warehouse for dry, refrigerated, and frozen products. And we have about 14 people on staff. We are projecting further growth. We're really pushing on building this into a sustainable long-term model for our area. We serve products of all types to all customers. We don't just work with schools and hospitals as a food hub. Especially over the last year and a half with COVID, retail has really become an incredibly strong and important focus for us because of the transition from a lot of retail or institutional purchasing to retail purchasing. That is reversing course a little bit, and we're seeing a lot more strength in institutions as things pick back up, thankfully. But that transition to a retail focus in recent months has meant that our product offerings have diversified quite a bit. So we're offering everything from fresh carrots to prepackaged Himalayan meals made in Burlington, Vermont, and everything in between. Within the context of schools and institutions more generally, we have found that there are some key products that really work that we use as our entry point to those schools. And those products really have been identified through trial and error. And they really come down to this marriage, this intersection of volume produced in the area with pricing and with consistency. So some of the key products that come to mind are carrots, yogurt, produced at a couple of our larger local yogurt producers. We are rich in dairy and yogurt in the state, and that shows in the sales that we do to schools. And potatoes. We actually buy a fair number of potato bags from Joe, just down the road. And beyond that, we're working on several other products as well that we hope to make into staples as we go forward, including things like bread. We've had a fair bit of luck with some meat, especially in the last couple of years, like ground beef. And depending on the type of school or the level to which that school is funding local food purchasing, we're able to get into some more specialty products that I'm happy to talk about. We have built this relationship or this partnership with Farm to School, our Farm to School program, and we've based it around the creation of relationships with our school partners. So our Farm to School program, our coaches really are in communication with the Farm to School representatives at our schools, whether that's the administrators or the cafeteria staff, on an extremely regular basis. And because of that relationship, because of the foundation that they've set, they're able to check in a way that the food hub, our food hub sales staff and so on, may not be able to, in that they get to really see under the hood, so to speak, and see what's working and what's not, and really get to have a lot of one-on-one in-depth troubleshooting time, in-depth visioning and creative time with those food service directors or with those principals. And that's really to our benefit as an organization and as a food hub who's trying to find and create markets for local food within these schools. And so one of the examples that, I don't know if Becca's on here from Green Mountain Farm to School up in Northern Vermont, but one of the examples of that is our coordination on the Harvest of the Month program, Vermont Harvest of the Month and New Hampshire Harvest of the Month, where we have this Harvest of the Month program with one crop or one set of crops spelled out for each month with a whole bunch of supporting documentation and resources for the schools. And we're able to, through the Farm to School program, help that school kind of organize themselves around what that Harvest of the Month program means for the school and how they can implement that within the context of the school, but also to be able to tie that back to sourcing. So at the same time that we're talking about programming and implementation within the school, we're able to talk about, okay, looking at the next year, what are the products that we need to bring in order to help that school source the food, bring it into the cafeteria, build taste tests out of it, build it into the menus once a week, once every other week, or whatever it might be, and then plan for that with our producers. That's one of the more direct examples. How am I doing on time, by the way?
Oh, you're already past it, boss.
Already past it. All right. Well, I would say, let me just round out by saying that we're looking forward to a lot of new changes as we kind of hopefully ease our way out of the COVID era. In Vermont, we have a new local food purchasing incentive that's really changing the landscape for what schools are able to purchase, and thus what we are able to do on the back end to find products and match make products to those school needs. So we're doing more work than ever on procuring product from across our region, and also in partnering with other food hubs across the region and also up and down the East Coast to find source identified, family run, family produced foods, fresh foods that really work to the specs that schools need and help fill in the gaps and maintain the consistency in supply throughout the school year, which in our area happens to be a very difficult part of the year to maintain supply through. So a lot's changing on our landscape, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But I hope that is not too confusing overall. And I know that this relationship between farm to school and the food hub is a little bit hard to pull apart. So please don't hesitate to ask more questions if we want to get into it any further.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions coming from your great points there in the Q&A. Next up on our panel is Joe from Lakeside Organics. Joe, if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself and your operation, that would be great.
Hello, Joe from Sikowski Farm in Lakeside Organics in Hadley. I farm a farm that's 460 acres. My grandfather started the farm in Hadley in 1916, and my family has always farmed in Europe before that and in America after 1916. Our main crops are squash. We harvest about 120 acres of squash. We do about 25 acres of carrots, 20-something acres of Brussels sprouts. We have 14 or 15 acres of strawberries, a lot of different crops, tobacco, blueberries, peaches, all sorts of things. Our main customer is Trader Joe's. We do all their diced butternut and veg noodles north of Washington, D.C. and east of Chicago. And they've been absolutely wonderful to work with. We also do a number of schools. We do the University of Massachusetts, where we supply about 25% of what they get for produce. We're only 1.5 miles from UMass. We also do the city of Boston with 6 different items. And we do Worcester, Chicopee, Frontier Regional, and a number of other smaller schools, some with Hartford. It's been a good fit for us. I'd like to say that I personally like the farming part best. I love to see things grow. No matter how many times I see a crop come in, it's still amazing to me. It's a miracle. It's what I like the best. That's really where my heart is. The rest of the stuff is just a terrible waste product of agriculture, the bookkeeping and following all the regulations. So the farming part is the fun part. Selling in Massachusetts, dealing with all the regulations and the confusing regulations. They've changed the labor laws on us 3 times in the last 2 years. And there's another vote coming up in the legislature to do it again. Nobody understands what any of these rules and regulations mean. It's a terrible spot to be in. It's a cluster disaster of regulations in our state right now. And it exposes you to tremendous liability because Massachusetts is a triple damages state with a 3-year look back. You're trying to navigate all these rules, and nobody really knows what they mean. It's just a effing mess. So that's the biggest one. Is some of the food safety rules. To sell to schools, we carry $5 million worth of liability insurance. We also spend $1,800 a week on food safety tests to make sure that we always send safe product into any customer. We do countless swab tests. We have everything gets cycled. We have a 3-day audit every year. Well, we didn't in the COVID year because people couldn't come out, but we have a 3-day audit once a year from SAI Global. I don't mind the food safety regulations. I think it makes us better farmers. And if I got a kid sick by eating something that wasn't safe, I would really be upset. And I think the farm to school program would suffer terribly if somebody ever brought some product to the schools that hadn't been tested or wasn't safe. The people that we work with at the schools are very pleasant and very nice to work with. They're really good people. The cafeteria staff and the people who do the ordering, they have to go out of their way to break out the local items from the other items and place a separate order and receive a different truck. a load of produce. And that's all good. They don't seem to get compensated for their extra effort or rewarded in any way. And I'd like to see ways that they could, or other ideas of how other states might be helping the people who feed the children and buy local get rewarded for the extra effort. There's nothing in our state right now. I'd like to see something because I think they really deserve it. There's a lot of people who just don't have the time or want to take the trouble to order locally. And I think if there was a little bit more motivation behind it, it might help them do that. I'm trying to think what else would be important here. If all these rules and regulations make it very difficult for a young person to get their start in this area, it's almost as if they're cutting off the bottom rungs of the ladder. You know, you need a real facility to start. You have to have all your food safety stuff, all your inspections, and you know, everything, your licenses, your produce safety training. We have a whole staff that's all in compliance with that. So it's very hard. I would think it would be very hard for somebody to start, and it's getting harder all the time because of all the new regulations and the uncertainty about what the regulations mean and how they would apply to a farm. And whether or not, if you peel a butternut squash or peel a carrot, is that now classified as manufacturing? I wouldn't think that peeling a carrot would be manufacturing. And I don't think when you deliver it to the cafeteria, they would decide that it's manufacturing. But the state attorney general is looking at that right now. And it's a very precarious spot to be in. And I'm not too happy about that. It's a carrot. You know, where's the crime? So that's, those are my thoughts on the Farm to School program. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe and Alex. So I'm going to move into a facilitated dialogue, but I do want to remind everyone that we're hoping for some that this conversation between these two producers stimulated some questions of your own. So while I'm posing a couple questions to the two panelists who gave us their time today, feel free to type any questions you may have into the chat so that we can get those answered for you. And I want to ask you both, Joe and Alex, the same question, but maybe I'll start with Alex because Joe just finished speaking. And Alex, I'm wondering, what was there a key decision or a key point where you decided that as a food hub or as an operation that you guys wanted to sell to schools? What sort of drove that decision process for you?
Yeah, good question. And the answer is, I think that it decided itself for us. Our food hub, as it exists today, 12 years later, really started when a couple school food service champions, so head chef or food service director champions in our area, reached out to some folks at UVM Extension through connections and said, hey, we know about Green Mountain Orchards, we know about Harlow Farm, we know about these big farms in the area. You know, we may shop there personally, we shop there personally all the time. We want to get those products, those apples, that lettuce into our school cafeterias, and we don't have a good way to do that. Like, we can send our own, one of our staff members up there to pick it up and bring it back down, but we don't have the time to do that. Those farms are larger. They are selling into larger wholesale type accounts and having folks like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or any of the other big guys pick up at their docks rather than doing these little micro deliveries around the local area. So that connection just wasn't made until those schools spoke up and say, hey, we need this. And that's when some folks at UVM Extension stepped in, commandeered the Subaru and started driving boxes of apples around. And ever since then, we have just been primarily a school-oriented food hub, food distributor by default.
That's so great. It was really driven by market demand more so than as we see on other occasions where it's, you know, driven by farmers trying to access other markets. So that's great. And Joe, I'd pose the same question to you. What particularly excited you or interested you and shaped your decision to start selling to schools as a primary market?
Right. Well, we're only a mile and a half away from UMass, and that made it pretty easy to get started. We were selling to the top of the campus restaurant. And then when Kin Toon took over the food service portion of the college, they wanted to bring in stuff for the rest of the school. So it was pretty easy to start. We were also looking for more markets as we lost the tobacco business around that time. People weren't smoking like they should, and sales fell off in the tobacco. So we replaced some of the crop acreage with vegetables, and it kind of worked out.
That's great. Thank you both for that. And
Mike, there's a quick question for Alex. If now might be a good time. Can you dig into the products you mentioned that are going to schools, like the carrots and potatoes, and are they whole or processed? Any work with carrot sticks or veggie snacks?
Yeah, good questions. For the most part, what we have done for schools has involved whole, unpeeled, raw carrots and potatoes. So the carrots are have for us proven to be a relatively easy low bar to entry for schools, not extremely labor intensive compared to potatoes, I would say. On the potatoes, we have over the years done a fair bit of coordinating with our farm to school program and our coaches there to try to help schools that are wanting to bring in fresh local potatoes to find grants and funding to buy equipment like potato peelers and other automating equipments to make that fresh potato a more realistic option for them. And so by combining that work and that hardware with our potato sourcing, we've been able to make it work. We do have a couple processors in the area that we're trying to work with more, Joe included. We are hoping to get more into some of the fresh lightly processed goods that you're doing, Joe, and also down at the Western Mass Processing Center, which is a nonprofit that runs its own lightly processed frozen veggie line geared toward institutional markets. In theory, you know, even if that product does come with a bit of a price premium, which it does, that should offset whatever labor investment those schools would otherwise have to make in doing their own processing. But in practice, finding those, making those connections and getting to the point where the school and the people making those financial decisions are comfortable has been more difficult. So that has been a little bit slow going for us. So carrot sticks, veggie snacks, yes, we're working in that direction, and little by little, we're seeing some successes and hope that we're able to grow that. And then Jameson, you also mentioned the Grateful Green sample, which is a little producer doing indoor soil grown sunflower greens. They're really hoping to get it into schools. What we're finding there is that pricing is it's a great product, amazing nutritional profile and so on. But just because of the nature of the product, the pricing is relatively high, and finding a way, a strategy to fit that into school meals or school snacks or a la carte or something is still a challenge that we haven't quite solved.
And Joe, there's a question in for you to describe your on-farm processing, your light processing that you mentioned. What types of processing are you doing farm?
We cut some of our own produce. We take, customers want to buy the edible portion of vegetables. They're not interested in, getting a cabbage root on a cabbage, or, the stem on a squash, or the seeds in a squash. So we take our butternut and we take the skin off, and we take the seeds, we thrash the seeds out. And interestingly enough, we even make a butternut seed oil from the seeds. On the zucchini, we make noodles out of it, vegetable noodles, for instance. And that's been a good item for us, a very good item for us. We actually make the machines that peel squash and make the vegetable noodles. And we sell those to other people, but that's separate of the farm. That's something I do personally with the machinist in the area. So those are the kind of items we do. We'll peel carrots. We're cutters. We don't add anything to it. We don't add any. There's no additives added to the product, because according to the Department of Labor, once you, for instance, if you were making cider and from your own apples, that's agriculture. Now, if you were to take and make a sparkling cider by adding sugar to get the bubbles and the effervescence in it, now that's no longer agriculture. So we cut our produce and we do not add anything to it. So that's supposed to keep it as agriculture. There's some question whether or not Massachusetts has a different definition as of a year ago or 2 years ago with the chain case. So we do basically cutting so that the school or the customer gets the portion of the produce that somebody can eat. That's the kind of cutting we do.
That's great. Thank you there. Keep your questions coming, everybody. So I know that we, what I'd like to do is from you guys' perspective is ask you to, if you could, put you on the spot, target in on two or three of the top issues that you think that the participants on this program are potential trainers to train farmers how to access schools. So I'm wondering if you could maybe help us understand what some of the top issues that they should be focusing on when they're training producers to enter into a school market. And you can start, Alex, if you'd like to start, that would be fine.
Okay. I may throw out a couple things and then pause to think a little more. But some things that come to mind first. Now, this may just be a factor of growing in New England, where growing is maybe harder than it is in many parts of the country, but know what products really are viable. Like there's a fair bit of work to be done in matching both what the school food service actually uses enough of to make that purchasing mean something, to make it make a dent, as well as what the farm or farms that you're considering that are on the table are able to produce at scale and an economy of scale that makes the pricing work. And so finding those 2 or 3 products and spending the time to do that, I think is, in our experience, has proven much more effective at laying a foundation for building than trying to start with everything all at once. So even if you're only getting 2 or 3 products into the school, that's a huge win for the farmers and for the schools. Another issue that comes to mind that I hear about a lot, and that I just want to maybe put some observations out about, I'd be interested in Joe's perspective on this, is food safety. And so one of the first things that maybe people who are a little bit out of our little local loop here mention when they think about farms selling into schools is, oh, the food safety regulations must be immense, must be a huge barrier. In our experience with the schools that we've served, we to date haven't run up a lot against a lot of stringent requirements when it comes to at least K through 12 school needs. There are a couple that will ask for product coming from GAP or GAP equivalent certified farms, but for the most part they're not, which continues to surprise us a little bit. And I guess we're kind of waiting and preparing for that other shoe to drop as FSMA regulations and so on start to be rolled out and enforced. The world of higher education is a completely different story. But that K through 12 food safety, relative lack of emphasis on food safety certification is still notable to us and surprising. And yeah, Joe, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing down your way.
The schools aren't clamoring for a lot of food safety information or documentation, but the liability is still there. And I think you also have a little bit more of a compromised population when you sell to schools, especially, young kids, kindergartens, preschools. And then again, with older people and when you sell to hospitals, because they're just not as rugged as a full grown person. And, it's a different world than it was before. Now, even when my daughters go to school, one of my daughters can't bring any peanut product into her classroom. It takes some care, and the schools haven't really been making a lot of noise about it. But if something was to happen, it could still get pretty bad. So you still have to be careful. I think anybody who does it should make sure they have the proper insurances so that if there was liability, they would be protected. But more importantly, I think it's important that the product be checked out. We can't start even peeling a product or selling a product from a field until we send in a sample to advanced food labs. And it's checked for listeria, salmonella, coliform, fecal, a whole bunch of stuff. And then after the stuff is cut, it goes back again for another sample to be tested to make sure that it's safe even after we cut it. The room where we do any of the cutting, we do countless swab tests every week in that room. Every surface gets tested, and when they do the annual audit with SAI, they even swab like the electric motors where you wouldn't be cleaning, and they can even swab the doorknob on the bathroom or inside the table legs in the room. It might not seem important unless something goes wrong. Then it's important. And we've been working with schools for about 10 years or more, and nothing has gone wrong. And I want to keep it that way.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to get into my chat because I did see a follow-up question for Alex. We're coming up close to time, but I didn't want to ignore a participant question. Alex, what kind of procurement model do your schools utilize? Oh, excuse me, there was a second question that came in and threw off my reading. This question goes back to your food safety comment, Alex. Do you find that the food safety is that statement you made about not seeing a lot of it, is that still true when you're working with schools that are managed through a food service management company? Or is there a difference in the way those treat that?
Yeah, so in our experience, again, with K through 12, taking that as a very separate world than higher education, even the food service management companies that we work with, and there are only a small handful within our area, they are not, like Joe said, they're not clamoring for food safety certification documentation. I think that the extent that we've seen has been that on any RFPs for product, for forward contracts or anything like that, One of the questions on the RFP will be, are you or do you source from GAP certified farms? We can say, yes, we do. We can offer that. But then when it comes to actually purchasing and deciding on products, we're not being grilled about, okay, is this farm GAP certified? Is this farm GAP certified? So that's our experience. And Stephanie, if I remember correctly, you're down at Farm Fresh, Rhode Island. So I don't know if there's a way for you to chime in and say what your experience is down there, but up here, that's what we've seen. And like I said, it's surprised us. And then the procurement model question from Alexis, it's all over the board. And I think it really depends on the who is managing that program. So if it's an independently managed program at a school or a school district, we're more likely to be brought on kind of an informal fashion. If it's managed by a food service management company, we're more likely to at least fill out some kind of initial RFP for the year to bid on some products. And that bid helps us to get our foot in the door on those products, but also kind of sets the foundation for more creative and a la carte purchasing with each food service director from then on out. But again, in our experience, we have not been 100% beholden to those bids. That's not been our make or break winning those bids because I think in large part because of our farm to school program and the close relationships that we're able to create with our food service people, we are able to maintain kind of this ongoing flexibility and creativity and look for opportunities and take those opportunities when we see them.
That's great. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'm gonna come up with one that's on my mind for you, Joe. And that would be if you could speak a little bit to, because it sounds like you distribute directly to schools yourself, and then also you do that distribution through a third party with the food hub with Alex. And I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit on what the differences are in those two, and if there's a preference for you on farm. Does one of those, is it easier to have a third party, or is it easier for you to deal directly with the institution yourself?
Any sale is a good sale, right? If we have more than we can eat, so I'm happy to sell. Whether I sell and ship direct to the school, that's fine. And to sell to a third party or a food hub, that's fine too. We usually charge more when we go directly to the school because we're adding a service where we're delivering it to the dining hall or the cafeteria or wherever. Like Chicopee is 13 stops because there's 13 different dining halls. Boston, it goes through their warehouse in Dorchester, and that's been all right. They were going through Russo, who closed on September 10th and kind of left a few surprises on the table. But they were able to pick up the ball, and they did a good job covering, I think it's 120 something schools in Boston. So we couldn't do a direct school delivery for something that complicated. But we're happy to go direct to the school, and it's kind of okay either way.
So you run your own trucks then?
Yeah, we have 4 refrigerated straight trucks and 1 refrigerated trailer truck.
Not seeing any more questions. I think we're coming up close to time. So I guess I just would thank you both for your time today. And then secondarily, thank you so much for your commitment to local foods. I did just get another question, which I will put back to you, Joe, that says, how many people do you have on staff?
We have 2 businesses here. We have the Joe Sikowski farm, and then with the organic portion of the farm is separated out as Lakeside Organics because the organic auditors didn't want commingled books a number of years ago, as it was a muddy puddle. and they get a commission. There's about 50 of us altogether.
That's great. Well, barring any questions, again, I thank you both so much. I'm sure there's a silent Zoom round of applause going on for both of you right now for your time with us today, and then again with your commitment to local foods and supporting local farmers. So thank you both very much, and keep up the good work.
All right, welcome back, folks. So jumping back into our agenda will lead us into our next session on how to approach evaluating your local producer training. So we're visited by Lydia Oberholzer, one of the evaluation partners on the Bringing the Farm to School project. Without further ado, I can pass it to you, Lydia.
Thanks, Tomas. I'm Lydia Oberholzer. Some of you may know me. I may know some of you. I live in Maryland. I've worked in the Northeast quite a bit on farm to school and farm to institution. So I know a little bit about the area. I've been in research and evaluation in food systems for almost 2 decades. So I've been around the block a bit. Today I want to talk to you about evaluating the trainings that you'll be doing. We see it as a really important part of hosting the trainings is the evaluation piece. We're also aware that before we developed the evaluation protocols and tools before the pandemic even hit. The tools and everything needed to go through the US OMB process, the Office of Management and Budget process. And because of that, it takes a long time. So we needed to develop these tools before the pandemic hit, before even the trainings were ready to go. So we're aware that there are some issues that need to be tweaked over time as you develop your trainings. And I'll talk more about that in the future, but I did want to bring that up. So of course we developed the evaluation trainings, evaluation surveys so that we can look at both improving future trainings as well as what have been the impacts of the trainings with the producers. You can go to the next slide. This is an overview of the 3 parts of the surveys that will be done with producers, and the facilitators of each training will hopefully take part in 2 out of 3 of these pieces. So you play a really important part of this. Before the training even starts, we are asking producers to take part in a 10 to 15 minute pre-survey. And then at the end of the training, they will take part in a very short 5 to 10 minute post-survey. The third piece is like 6 months to a year after the training. We will take part, we will coordinate that. We're going to be sending producers a survey via email. And it's a really, really quick 5-minute survey. And I can go through with you the survey content. I think that's on the next slide. The pre-survey, of course, looks and obtains information about farm demographics. So the size of the farms of the farmers taking part, products produced, and the year's farming, basic demographics. We also want to look at knowledge change based on the training itself. So looking at ratings, so it will be self-reported ratings of knowledge regarding farm to school topics and confidence in marketing to schools. These will be done on the pre and the post surveys that we hope you'll take part in. In terms of participation in farm to school activities, we want to look at change in that way as well. So on the pre-survey, we'll ask about current participation in farm to school sales, whether they're direct or through intermediaries, such as a food hub. And then when we do the follow-up, like a year or 6 months later, we want to look again at, are they participating at higher levels, or are they taking part newly in farm to school sales? And the post survey, of course, will look at feedback on the training itself. So what did they find most useful? What did they find? And the topics that they need more information on. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll just talk through real briefly the different slides in the training that deal with the surveys. All of this is outlined in a protocol that we will be getting to you. And it details every step to be taken. So there's no need to really take notes now or anything like that. If you're having, so this is slide deck, you'll see this is the introduction slide deck. It's 2 slides, slide 3 and 4. They provide instructions for conducting the pre-survey at the beginning of the training. If you're having an in-person training, we'll be sending you a packet of surveys and the protocol in paper. And Mara will talk a little bit more about that right after I'm done here. And if it's virtual, you'll be leading them to the pre-survey link, which is done over SurveyMonkey. All of it will be done virtually. Each of the pre-surveys have an informed consent process that is done for human research, but also for OMB. Just talks about the survey, what they're taking part in, and what their rights are as a participant. That will be done, of course, online through the pre-survey link, or it will be done in paper, and it will be in your packet. We want to make sure that you're reminding producers about their participation in terms of it being voluntary. The evaluation really is voluntary. We hope people will take part in it, but it is voluntary. And that they don't have to respond. They can take part in it and not respond to certain questions on the survey. Again, it is voluntary, but we hope they will, they'll take part in it. Once they're finished with their survey, if it's in person, they're going to be folding their consent form and survey. It will be in a packet together. They're going to fold it in half and bring them up to you. And those will go in a folder that comes back to us. If it's virtually, they'll be just submitting the submit button online. For the post survey, which is the next slide, it's really much like the pre-survey. At this point, you're reminding them that they took part in the pre-survey. This is a really short survey. It's like 5 minutes, and goes through a lot of the same questions that were on the pre-survey to look at whether there's any change. If it's virtual, so this is the post-survey slide is found on conclusion, slide deck number 12, slide number 12. This is the screenshot from that. If it's virtual, again, there's a link there to the virtual link for the post survey. If they're taking it in person, again, handing out the survey and taking part in it in paper. Again, reminding them it's voluntary, and all those things that will be outlined in the protocol. And finally, you might want to, at this point, again, it's noted in the protocol, remind them that they'll complete a third survey. They'll be getting an email to complete a third survey in 6 months to a year, and to look for that. You can go to the final survey slide, sorry. Just some final notes, and I'm happy to answer questions about individual ideas about what you might be doing with your workshop, which might change this process. But we want to remind you to stay in touch with NCAT and NFSN as you develop your workshops. We are going to be there to help you with your evaluation pieces. And if you're in person, send you the packets for your evaluation. So just to make sure that that's being done. Again, over time, as we've done these workshops, we're aware that some people won't be doing the workshops in the way that we have outlined. And we're putting together FAQ on, like, say you're doing just a day's worth of, or 2 of the modules. What do you do if you're just doing 2 of the modules? Or we're doing 1 module 1 day and another module 10 days later. What do we do? So that should be available as well pretty soon. And another question I get often is whether facilitators can get responses to the surveys that come in from the pre and the post survey. And of course, we're happy to do that if you let us know. We will be asking producers what city and state they took their workshop in. And so we can filter for those surveys, and we're happy to feed that back to you if you let us know. We're going to be sending this, just a quick reminder that we're going to be sending out a survey any minute. It should be showing up in your inbox. I think that Lacey and Tomas have given time at the end of the session to take part in that. It's really important for us. The facilitators of this workshop have really used those comments to make this workshop better. So we hope you'll participate. And that's it for me. I don't know if you want to go to Mara now or take questions.
Why don't we have Mara just introduce herself real quick, so y'all can put a name with a face, and then we'll take a few questions. Thanks, Lydia.
Thanks, Tammy, and thanks, Lydia. Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Henn. I am a community food systems specialist at NCAT, and I am helping with the evaluation details for this project. And I just wanted to take a moment, introduce myself so that if you hear from me, you know who's reaching out to you from NCAT, who is this Mara person. I will be connecting with the leads for the producer trainings and arranging and coordinating the details about if you need the hard copy materials for the evaluation, and just helping with all the details that kind of revolve around that. So it's great to be here with all of you and to meet some of the other folks who are making all of this happen. And thanks for being here. That's all I really had, and I'll stop so there can be questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mara. Any questions for Lydia or Mara?
All right, great. Yeah, so as I said, this is the last session for the day. We're going to be talking about just planning and promoting your trainings with a guide that was created by Anna Molin, NFSN's communications director, with some support and help from NCAT along the way. So for context, throughout this week, you've been learning about the training content, you've been meeting with your state teams, hopefully you've been doing a great deal of brainstorming and thinking about ways to actually put all of this into practice. So this last session will serve as kind of a structural support for you as you start approaching the event planning and outreach for those local producer trainings. Next slide. So we have about 45 minutes for this session, but the majority of the time is actually going to be spent in your state breakout teams. So this last session, we really want you to start thinking about creating the local producer training and really starting to touch on some of the tools in the planning and outreach guide. We're going to ask you to review some of the key components of it, and then we're going to set you up with an activity to help you guide your next breakout session through the planning and outreach guide. So next slide. Yeah, so if you're able to go ahead and pull up the planning and outreach guide right now. For those of you who are accessing it digitally, you can go ahead and enter that in the chat for you. One moment. There you are. Yeah, so go ahead and access that. And we just want to really give you a rundown of this guide. The intention of this tool is to both provide you with a checklist on how to plan a training from start to finish, and to provide you with the tools and templates to make this an easy lift. So, I just wanted to note that it also interacts with the facilitator's guide quite a bit. So you should notice that these two tools are kind of designed to work in tandem with each other. We designed the guide recognizing that you all are professionals, and this is likely not the first time you've conducted outreach for a workshop. So with that said, we tried to build this guide as a roadmap. It's designed not to replace you, but rather just to help you get your work done faster. We wanted to give you the setting and some tools to not only approach the local producer trainings with producers in mind, but just a really comprehensive list and format for you to adopt if you see fit. So everything here should be considered fair play to adapt however you want to. To start us out, the power of the checklist. At the core of this guide is a giant checklist. So we've designed it to give flow to any kind of planning processes you may have. You can literally start at the beginning and work your way straight to the end to have a successful training. This checklist, however, it doesn't know the specifics or details of your local producer training. So you'll need to read through it and make sure you make decisions and adjust all of these sort of finer details to your local situation. This tool needs your localization to work best. Moving on, the guide versus rule book and localizing the content. Please don't sort of take what is presented here as gospel. You'll note that we keep on using the word guide, but you are the experts in your area and you're the experts of your own community. So really modify this checklist or guide however you see fit. Be sure to notice a few things. We created an online version of this document that is fully hyperlinked. For this tool, the digital version may actually work a little better than the hard copy because it's meant to be interactive in that kind of a way. The purple links will take you quickly through the digital version of this document. Blue hyperlinks will send you to editable versions of the templates. And at the bottom of every template, a blue hyperlink will send you straight to a downloadable and editable Microsoft Office document that you can use to customize as you see fit. Next slide. So the main focus of this session, in a few minutes, you'll be breaking out into your state teams and actually start planning the local producer trainings. Once you're in your state teams, we like to first just take some time clicking through getting through the toolkit, familiarize with the format of it, just do a quick kind of scan of it, start thinking about how you can make it for you and how this can apply to your own local producer training with a specific focus on the timeline and flow of the planning. Sort of, does it match your capacity? So things like that. Does it match your capacity? Does it match the sort of seasonal and cyclical yearly cycles of producers in your area? So keep all these things in mind when you're reviewing this tool. And yeah, start customizing it to your location. So really spend some time discussing what this means to your team and how it can be applied. Where are the gaps? How can they be filled? Who needs to be brought into see this tool be carried out efficiently. And yeah, next slide. So in your breakout session, we want you to come up with answers to 5 questions that we can share in the chat. They're also listed on here on the screen. So be sure to appoint someone who can be a note taker and record your answers to these questions. At the end of the day, we'll do a share back and closing with some of the answers that your groups came up with. So I'll be sure I can share this in the chat for you so you have access to it there. And yeah, just think on these questions in addition to the checklist and planning and outreach guide. So, where do you see this training being conducted? Sort of who is the producer audience? Yeah, really spend some time kind of mulling over these questions and coming up with some answers. So we're going to go into our state groups now. When we return, we're going to go on a 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we'll give some space for teams to share their answers. And then we'll be closing for the day. So Carlos, if you want to get us started, we can start going into our groups now. All right, welcome back, everyone. So before we start the closing process, just wanted to revisit the friendly contest that we had with you all participating. So it seems as if looks like New Hampshire is the winner of the contest, followed by the runners-up of New York and Maine. So congratulations, New Hampshire folks. We'll be sending out a $25 gift card confirmation to your team via email. So look out for those virtual cards sent by our folks at NCAT. Yeah, congrats on that. So yeah, we want to hear from you all. So hopefully you all have appointed someone to do the share back regarding the questions that were shared with you in the last session. I'm going to go down the list of state teams, and someone just come off mute, share the answer to those 5 questions, and yeah, hopefully we'll get a better sense of just how everyone's feeling around these local producer trainings and what ways we can support each other in this process. So let's start with Maine. Is there a
Hi.
Oh, great. Mhm.
I don't know if we answered all the 5 questions exactly.
Mhm.
We did talk quite a bit just about kind of like timeline and capacity and feeling like we need to regroup. We put a little reminder for us to regroup in a few weeks after having some more time to process the training, and like half of the cohort hadn't received their booklets until today, so they're kind of been a little out of the loop. So talked about needing some more time to actually meet outside of the training to answer some of the questions. And then we also just had a good, honest conversation about kind of feeling about capacity and feeling, yeah, we were looking at thinking about our own capacity to make this happen, but then particularly looking at the funding opportunities and having some concerns from all of us having applied for and worked on the grants that were listed as opportunities to fund the producer training are very competitive and time intensive grants that a lot of our state partners are already competing for. And just had a lot of conversation about wondering how other states might think about funding these trainings. Again, thinking, are there other outlets beyond these USDA grant programs, which all of us are very familiar with and used to applying for, so know what a lift those grant applications are, and that it's often competitive for us here. So not trying to sound I think it indicates where we're at collectively is like, wow, we just need so much more capacity and funding support to actually make this happen in a robust way in our state. And I don't know if that answers the questions, but that's what we talked about. So I would love to hear from other states too on like how are other people going about funding this and different ideas for capacity and funding. So I'll pass it on. And if anyone else from Maine wants to share out, you're welcome to as well.
Steph, I will jump in and just a question that surfaced for us, a very like nitty gritty question, was about for the producer trainings, whether any states have charged a fee, if that's allowable with the program, and what that fee might look like to producers to help offset the cost. So I'll just throw that question out there.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, certainly we'll be compiling some of the kind of innovative and creative ways that state teams are going to be rolling out these local producer trainings, and we'll be sure to compile them and just share them with other states who have gone through this workshop, just so everyone's aware of applicable like ideas that you can transfer into your own implementation. So, but thank you so much for sharing. Okay, let's see, Massachusetts.
This is David. I could go. We didn't talk about who would do this. So, but in terms of, we talked next steps. We talked about, convening some of the other partners, such as our farm to school organization, our Department of Ed, who's been on the training this week, folks from Extension, the school nutrition association, some of our buy local organizations, which are regional organizations that work with farmers around the state, folks like that, to kind of talk about next steps, gauge interest in whether in partnering with something like this, and sort of go from there. And then we talked a bit about funding as well. We talked about the USDA Farm to School grant program, but we did also, talk about some other possible funding sources, such as the, local food promotion program that's also through USDA, or in terms of farm to fisheries, the seed grant funding, NIFA, and just so we were just trying to brainstorm on other sources of funding as well.
Great, thanks for sharing, David. Up next, Virgin Islands. I believe we have one attendee from Virgin Islands. If you're willing to share some of the planning that you're going through right now, that'd be great. All right, no worries. We can move on to New Hampshire.
Hi, I'll present, but if anyone from the group wants to say anything in addition, I think it's just been excellent to have breakout time with this group. New Hampshire, we do have the turnkey producer training grant to do this work. So we came into this conference with a little bit more outline of what the project would be, but we've had some switch up of our facilitators. So it has been really nice to talk to the people on the New Hampshire team, get more information from them. So today we kind of talked about possibly actually having one of the trainings here in the winter, which would be ideal because it's fresh in our memory, and then host another one end of season for 2022. And then possibly that would be enough time to have some of the people who attended the first one even share out at the second one if they're willing to do that. We discussed the pros and cons of planning for a virtual one versus in person. That's definitely difficult when planning during a pandemic. You want to do what's best, which always kind of is in person, but you don't want to plan in person and then last minute have to switch and have a less robust virtual training. So we talked about those things. We'll work with an advisory committee going forward for planning this that has New Hampshire Farm to School. So that's Stacy, the New Hampshire Farm to School network as well. And hopefully the people that are a part of this training. So, and then we have some funding for the facilitators through the grant to do that work. So after this week, we have a lot of work to do we have to kind of change up our grant with Sabel and then get approval for that and then move forward to pick out our contracted facilitators. So lots of work to do, but we're really excited and grateful for this time that we worked with all of your experts, as well as the time for the breakout sessions. It's a lot of information. Let's hope it stays in our brains.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, moving on, New York.
Hi, so I'll share for New York. So we talked about, the why is really ensuring that our producers are on board and really understand the benefits and challenges of working with school districts. And also to inform them about, in New York State, we have the 30% initiative and all of the documentation that might go along with that school districts would be asking for. And in terms of planning, like who we would ask to be on the team, producers, but being mindful of time that we're asking for Cornell Cooperative Extension teams across the state, and then our state agencies like State Ed and Ag and Markets. And for the planning, we were talking about doing, we're a pretty large state and travel is an issue. So doing some kind of hybrid in-person and virtual. So virtual for the topics that would apply to everyone, and then kind of break out and have in-person trainings for more local based topics. And that would we're trying to do it this winter, maybe early 2022. Funding is kind of an issue. There is some funding available, but not necessarily enough to cover the whole cost, especially if we're doing in-person in like 6 or 7 or 8 locations around the state. And also we had discussions about whether or not to charge, because we want it to be free and open, but also want to have some accountability so that farmers that sign up for something that's free have a reason to show up, even if it's a nominal fee. So I think that kind of covers it, unless anyone else from New York wants to add anything.
Great, thanks so much for sharing. Then lastly, Rhode Island.
Hey everyone. So we also were kind of hoping to be able to pull this off over the winter, since we have an already planned training or gathering that is an annual purchasing and selling farm to school event that people seem to value. So in theory, we would try to do this over the winter, like a few other states have said. And we do have a little bit of funding already from a USDA Farm to School grant that could go towards this. So Sibel will probably be talking to you about that too, if we need to change that. And our group is pretty much the people that were here today, or this week rather, as well as our Department of Ag, who's very involved also with our farm to school stuff. And then Cooperative Extension is somebody that we just haven't tapped into yet, and could also help offset costs with paying a facilitator or something along those lines. I don't really remember what other questions there are in here. Yeah, when we were thinking of focusing on larger farms and trying to find and focusing on new avenues potentially for farmers that have been selling into schools already for a while, to be able to enhance that practice that they already have going. Yeah, we have a lot of small and medium-sized farmers in Rhode Island. So we were talking a little bit about whether or not how to include them while keeping the content relevant for everybody involved too.
Great, thank you so much. It's really great to hear from all of you about just how you're approaching this work, identifying where some of the points that are needing some support, and then sharing your excitement around other areas of approaching these trainings and the planning and everything else that goes into them. So thank you so much for sharing. Moving on, so we had mentioned that you're not alone in in your team for each state in conducting some of the logistical processes of getting this training off the ground. So we just wanted to remind you all that we will be able to provide technical assistance for your planning and as well as just other sort of coordination efforts that you all will be taking on as you're approaching your own trainings. This means that we'll have we've developed a technical assistance menu to assist you with starting the organization of these state producer trainings. And I believe we have some examples of that ready, which we'll share in the chat for you to access. But yeah, we're hoping that this will just be a nice touch point for you all to inform us of some of the areas of support that RTA can be applied towards, as well as just serving as another way for all of us to sort of stay linked together in our efforts. And as I've alluded to, we're hoping to really compile a lot of the statuses that each state is facing currently in their approach of planning this training. So these are states outside of this region that have already gone through this workshop and are already in the process of planning their training, as well as the states within your region right now who are just getting done with this workshop and are thinking towards the future. So we're hopefully going to be able to compile a lot of these ideas and share them with you in time. So please be on the lookout for that. Yeah. So otherwise, really just let us know. Let us know how you're going to be implementing these trainings so we can work with you on evaluation support or offer support in any other sort of areas of this, very large and, a really large effort this training is. So we just want to recognize that and, really provide our time to supporting getting these trainings off the ground for you. So far, Tammy and I have provided technical assistance in the form of a few presentations that we've given to state teams who've brought in new partners and new folks that are working within their state teams. So that's just one way that technical assistance can look like as we move forward. But yeah, just please find ways to keep us aware of some of the things that you're going to be introducing to producers within your state. On that note, we'd like to thank our partners at the Office of Community Food Systems, all of the guests that have presented over these last 4 days. Of course, our teammates at New York University, everyone at National Center for Appropriate Technology, and then my team at the National Farm to School Network. Most importantly, thank you all for spending a whole week with us. It was a heavy lift. We got through a lot of information and a lot of material, but we're really appreciative that you're able to spend this time with us on this week. So what we'll do now is we are actually going to allow you all to go back into your breakout rooms with your state teams if you wish. Carlos will keep the rooms open for really within reason as long as needed. So you have the option of going back with your state breakout teams if you want to just keep the conversations going. If not, wishing you a farewell and best of luck to bringing the farm to school in your areas.